I have had a lot of Android devices over the years. A lot. And one iPhone. 2016 was kind of a weird year for me. I don't think I had fully come to terms with the death of Harambe, so I did what everybody does when they're feeling down, and I bought an iPhone so that I could be accepted as a blue bubble for the first time in my life. But we'll just pretend that didn't happen. But as I was saying, I've had a lot of Android devices over the years, and it all started with the Droid Eris. Now let me set the scene. It's 2009. The world is still hugging the toilet with swine flu. I'd just gotten home from a long shift of pushing carts at Toys R Us. I plop my fat ass down on the couch to watch the Broncos game, and I see this commercial. An ominous and mysterious commercial about the Motorola Droid. I instantly knew the key to being popular in school was to get a smartphone. So I set out on a mission to convince my parents to let me get one of those newfangled droids. After 2 difficult months of extra chores, careful persuasion, and getting half-decent grades, my parents finally folded and they let me get a smartphone. Now, I had to pay for the phone myself as well as the phone bill, but in January of 2010, I went on down to the local Verizon store and picked myself up the Droid Eris. First things first, I need to address the title of this video. Obviously, I have not been using this phone daily for the last 13 years. In fact, I only used it for about a year when I replaced it with the Droid Thunderbolt. But I must play the YouTube game, and this title seemed to work the best. Anyway, back to the story of how I was instantly popular because of a material possession. Alright, okay, so maybe the phone didn't make me instantly popular, but it did give me something to do in all those classes that I didn't care about. Having access to Facebook, YouTube, all the rage comics in the world, and thousands of games was life-changing. No longer did I have to carry around a camera, an MP3 player, my PSP, a flip phone. I had all of that and more in a small 4.5-inch rectangle that fit in my pocket better than my old flip phone ever did. The feeling of having Google in your pocket was incredible. One of your friends has a question? You got the answer right there. Fight in the hallway? Bam, you got a camera in your pocket. Need to update your status? Pow, Facebook at your fingertips. Did you make a wrong turn on the way to your friend's house? Shazam, Google Maps in your pocket. Seriously though, going from a flip phone to a smartphone was wild. It's something that isn't experienced by younger generations. It's just all smartphones now. I have a lot of nostalgia for this phone because of how awesome it was to have, and how much it changed my day-to-day life. It really is a hard to describe feeling. Now let's talk about Apple for a second. The iPhone had been out for 2.5 years when I got my Droid Eris. I remember seeing a kid on the bus with an iPhone 3GS, and it blew my mind. Like, literally, I could not wrap my head around how he was watching YouTube on a phone that wasn't on Wi-Fi. And I'll be honest, I wanted one. I wanted an iPhone. 16-year-old me wanted an iPhone, but there was a problem. The iPhone was only available on Singular, and we had Verizon. Had the iPhone been available on Verizon at the time, I most likely would have bought one instead of the Droid Eris. The scariest thing about that is, I would probably still be using an iPhone to this day. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and just rip the iPhone. The smartphone world would not be what it is today without the iPhone. It's truly a quality product, and I see why they sell so many. It's just not for me. Okay, back to the Droid Eris here. Obviously, I still have the box that my Eris came in. It's not too crazy or over the top, but I think it looks great, especially compared to modern packaging, where everything just seems to be white. You see what I mean? Everything's just white. It's a white box with the product on the front, and that's it. And I get it, we're all just trying to copy Apple and do what they're doing, but you cannot tell me that this box looks worse than these. This is a cooler box than any of these. This box had a little character to it. You can actually see where my mom peeled off the barcode so that we could get the mail-in rebate. Realistically, there's not much inside this box. It's pretty basic, and inside we have the original receipts. In total, the phone out the door cost me $215 on a new 2-year contract with Verizon. You know, makes you think back to the days when you could get a new phone for just a couple $100 compared to $1,000. Now, I'll be the first to admit it, my Droid Eris had a hard life. I've never been careful with my phones, but back in the day when smartphones were made of mostly plastic, I never bought a case or a screen protector. I just put the protection of my phone in the hands of God. That's a strategy I would not recommend to anyone who plans to keep a phone for longer than a month or two. But I am proud to admit that after 13 long years, most of that time spent in a drawer, everything on this phone still works. Even the battery still holds a charge. This bad boy has a 528 MHz processor from Qualcomm. It has a 320 by 480 3.2 inch display. It's got a 5 megapixel camera that also records in 240p. It's got 512 megabytes of RAM, a lovely micro SD card slot, which I have an 8 gigabyte card in, and as stated before, a lovely removable battery with 1300 milliamp hours. The front of the phone has a phone answer button, an end call button that doubles as the power button, and it has 4 capacitive touch buttons, and a trackball. Now, I'll be honest, when I got this phone, I thought I would use the trackball all the time. Yeah, no, the only thing I ever really used it for was to take pictures because it was also the shutter button. The back of the phone is pretty basic. It's just a single 5 megapixel camera and the Google logo. Obviously, like we said, the back of the phone comes off, the battery comes out, and yes, the memes are true. When you drop this thing, the battery would fly 23 feet away and you would lose the back of the phone under a cabinet or anywhere that is inconvenient to get to. Up top, we got a relic from the past, a headphone jack. And on the bottom, we have a mini USB port for charging and data transfer. When I first got this phone, it was running Android 1.6, which was also known as Android Donut. A few months later, it was upgraded to Android Eclair, also known as Android 2.1. Now, is it just me, or does anybody else miss the day when Android versions were named after sweets? Let me know in the comments. The Droid Eris was made by a Taiwanese company called HTC, which stands for High Tech Computer. HTC had their own UI on top of Android. It was called HTC Sense. Most Android phones at the time had a custom UI installed. Samsung had something called TouchWiz, which was just terrible. Like, truly, it was terrible. Even to this day, I can't stand Samsung's custom software. It's just not my style. HTC Sense was my style. It had a certain polish to it that wasn't too childish, but was also something a little different from the stock Android experience. One of my favorite things about HTC Sense was the fact that you could have multiple scenes. Scenes were almost like different profiles that you could use on the phone. You could switch between them for different things, right? So let's say you're a big business person. Well, guess what? There's a scene for you. Do you travel a lot? Well, boom, there's a scene just for you. It was a great idea that was implemented very well. I used to have multiple scenes set up for when I was working or at school, so I could have the apps and widgets right where I wanted them. Android at the time didn't have a built-in app manager, you know, where you can go and scroll through your apps, close apps, and switch between previously used apps. And what would happen is you would run out of RAM on this phone really quickly. This thing only had 512 megabytes of RAM compared to today's 12, 16 gigabytes of RAM. You would run out of RAM with just 5 or 6 apps open. So what you would have to do is you had an app installed on your phone called Advanced Task Killer, where you could go in and close those apps that you didn't want open and running in the background. So like here, you can see with all this stuff up and running, I only have 66 megabytes of RAM available. If I open one more app, the phone slows to a crawl. So multiple times throughout the day, you would have to open up this app and kill all those apps you had opened through the day. I don't remember the battery life of this little guy being too great. I always remember having to charge it up when I got home from school. But what can you expect with just a 1300 milliamp hour battery when modern phones are rocking 4 or even 5,000 milliamp hour batteries? 2009 to 2013 was like the Wild West for Android. Each manufacturer was trying to one-up each other to gain market share, and at any time there were like 50 different Android devices to choose from, each service provider having their own version of a phone. The Droid Eris was called the HTC Hero on Sprint and looked totally different, even though it was the same hardware. I have to admit though, it was a really fun time in smartphones. It seemed like every week there was a new phone that was coming out, and that's why I pull this phone out every year. So I have a comparison to new phones, but also to remind myself why I like Android so much compared to iPhones. When I get to play with this phone, I find myself almost enjoying it more than my new phone, because it brings such a feeling of nostalgia. It feels like I'm back in senior year of high school, sitting in the back of my English class playing Abduction World Attack again. Sometimes it can be hard to see technological changes year over year, but when you pull out the phone from 13 years ago and compare it to your new Pixel 7 Pro, you can truly appreciate how much has changed since 2010. Over the years, I've caught some flack for holding on to all these old phones. But to me, it's a way to see change that we don't necessarily see or even feel every day. I still love getting a new phone and playing with it and seeing what has improved, but oftentimes I feel a little disappointed in what Android has become. The phones are smarter, faster, and better than ever, but they're also more uniform and boring than they've ever been. There's not much character to a phone anymore, they're just slabs of glass, which is a shame. I would gladly trade a little performance for more fun in my day-to-day use of the phone. With that being said, thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't like the video, I thank you for watching it this long, and I will see you in the next video. Later.